Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. We are going to have a great show for you after I'm done with my intro and my monologue, etc. We have a great interview to do with Mac Regan, who's going to talk about politics, how we recover from COVID-19. Folks, you know how it is. You know how it is. The reality is that as it is right now, we are in dire straits. It has not hit yet. Today is April 1st, April Fool's Day. I hereby promise to run absolutely no April Fool's jokes. And I actually decided to make the promise after I hear Michael Rudden said April Fool's Day, going full screen to avoid the comment section today. And that kind of scared me. Are they going to prank me today on the April Fools with the messages? I don't know, folks. But anyhow, we're going to have a great show for you today. The title of the show today is the 2020 American Revolution, and we're going to discuss that with Mac Regan. But beforehand, I want to have a COVID-19 update and implications. Brothers and sisters, I want us to start, people say, this is not the time for blame. This is not the time for all these things. I am sorry. It has to be the time for blame, people, because this thing is ongoing. And if it's not the time for blame, what it then says, what we are immediately saying is that all the deaths that occurred, all the deaths that are likely to occur may continue because we are not putting the blame where it should go, and the same methodology being used in the past will be used again. So no, please bear with me. We must assign blame. And in assigning blame, we must talk about what is the solution after assigning blame. And why do I say that? I heard today Mr. Biden, the vice president, the Pence, went out there and he is starting to assign blame. And if he is successful in what he is doing, what he will be saying is he will misdiagnose the real issue that's getting us to all these deaths that's occurring here in the United States. And it's suddenly going to become that this belongs to the CDC, belongs to China. No, it does not. This is real. And let me play, let's remind how this stuff started with a piece done by Ali Velchi. Let's go ahead and play that, and then we'll move on from there.
For months, the president downplayed the impending devastating impact of the coronavirus, and now he is changing his tone.
We had a lot of people who were saying, maybe we shouldn't do anything, just ride it. They say, ride it like a cowboy. Just ride it, ride that sucker right through. That's where the 2.2 million people come in. Would have died, maybe. But
7
it would have been
minutes
1.6 to
until
2.2.
showtime.
And that's not acceptable.
Ride it like a cowboy is yet another term I didn't think I would ever have to say on TV during my career. But here's the problem. There is no scientific or medical expert who told the president, as far as we know, to ride it like a cowboy. In fact, the president himself continuously brushed off the threat of coronavirus.
Person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
How concerned are you?
Well, we pretty much shut it down coming in from China. We're finding very little problem. Now, you treat this like a flu. When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, it's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. Some people will have this at a very light level and won't even go to a doctor or a hospital. They'll get better. There are many people like that.
6 minutes.
That wasn't even a month ago.
What we had to do is, yes, it is imperative that we assign blame, because right now, Vice President Pence is out there doing exactly that. Now, let me explain something to people. The person that I'm going to have on today, Mac Mac Regan. He's not as progressive as I am, but he understands that with what's occurring with COVID-19, we have to ensure that what we rebuild from COVID-19 is not what we had in the past. And this person, this author, who calls himself a moderate, realizes that yes, we have to take care of income inequality. Yes, we have to take care of a lousy healthcare system. Yes, we have to take care of a lousy educational system. Yes, we have to stop giving people the figment of their imagination that somehow we in the United States are the best. In healthcare, we are 43rd. 43rd in that list of nations that I forgot what they call the list of nations. We're 43rd. So the question is, the first thing that we have to start thinking about is how to be truthful. And you're going to hear him talk a whole lot about that. But before we get there, I want you guys to be aware of what's going on, okay? And if you take a look at the program notes and the blog post for the program, I lead into several, what should I call these? Several articles. And I think it's important that we take a look at these articles. And the reason why, my friends, is simple. It's simple. Let's take a look at the first article that I have is called Texas Republican Politicians and Pastors Will Cause the Deaths of Many in Their Pew and the Population at Large. Check this story out. In Harris County, we have the judge of Harris County. In the way our county, each county has a judge, the boss of the county. And this young lady, Lina Hidalgo, she created a stay-at-home order. Now we have the most vile pastors are suing her. And what they're saying, check it out. It says, a hardline conservative power broker and 3 area pastors filed a petition with the Texas Supreme Court Monday, arguing that Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo's stay-at-home order violates the Constitution by ordering the closure of churches and failing to define gun shops as essential businesses. I want you to think about that. These are 2 pastors. These are 3 pastors that you would think care about the well-being of their pew. And what are they doing? They're suing the judge of the county, specifying that she should have kept gun stores open with this stay order, and she should have kept churches open. I wonder what is it about guns and churches that go together. I wonder what is it. But no, these pastors don't care about their pew. They don't care about their members. What they want is they want every healthy member to jump into that church because they don't want that affecting their tithes. They don't want that affecting their income. And why gunshots? Why guns? Why the gun shops? Well, you know, they have to do something that is that seems like they want to do this on constitutional grounds, right? So they do Second Amendment to get the Second Amendment folks riled up, and then the churches, to get the evangelicals riled up, and then they come to church, pay their tithes, get infected, and who knows, some die. And you know why the pastors may not mind if they die? Because I bet a lot of the estate of some of those old folks go directly to the church. These are evil pastors. If you dare try to say, keep the churches open, we know the coronavirus is transmitted much easier than even Ebola. But these pastors are saying, keep the churches open. Keep the churches open. That is a shame. Mr. Lee Grant, I think if we want to be honest, it is evil for a preacher to say, come to church when there's coronavirus going around. That is simply evil. It is saying, I'm going to kill some of my members, and who knows, I may get their estate. pastors, some of these pastors are worse than the scourge of the earth. Because first of all, they offer nothing. They offer nothing material to people. But at the same time, right now, these guys are messing with the lives of people who have faith in them. That is shameful. Other story I want you to take a look at. This one is at Common Dreams. Oh no, this one is at Jacobin actually. There's never been a better time for U.S. to end private health insurance than right now. And they start the article by saying the coronavirus crisis will lead to health insurance premiums increase by up to 40% next year. We can't afford that. Instead of seeing premiums skyrocket or bailing out private health companies, we need to seize this moment to abolish private insurance and create a single national insurance plan. Only solution. Only solution. And the reason why is that this coronavirus, whether you get it or not, and I want everybody that's listening to me to understand this. You may say, these bills are not going to affect me, so I want to keep my private insurance. These bills are not going to affect me. It's going to affect those people who happen to have gotten the coronavirus. Sit back. Fool yourself. Believe that. Let me tell you what it'll get you. You are going to pay for all those people that have coronavirus right now. Because your premiums are going to increase by 40% next year to cover these folks in the hospital. This is not the time. It is time for us to be now honestly pushing single payer healthcare, one insurance plan for everybody that is served by the doctor of their choice, that is served by the hospital of their choice. That is what we should be having right now, folks. That is what we need right now. So Jacobin is right. The U.S. healthcare system is going to be overwhelmed by the coronavirus pandemic for months to come. But when the spread of the virus finally does subside, many of its impacts will be here to stay. They claim we are going to do the testing for free. But that was a figment of your imagination. Because when you got the testing at the emergency room, guess what happened then? You were socked with the $2,000 or $3,000 emergency room bill and all the incidental costs. So that cheap little test was free. But everything else cost you an arm and a leg. Folks, we have the most evil system. And you'll hear my guest, who's a very moderate guy, talk somewhat about that as well. So let's remember that, folks. Don't be fooled. Let's not fall into the trap. Okay, the other subject at hand that I want to talk about are the other, what should I say, the other article that I think is of importance has to do with what is it? Medicare for All, I think, is now very positive in where it's at in people's minds. And let me get to the article. Here we go. Before we let me do that one first. The New Poland. New Poland, it says the following. New Poland says the following. Come on up. Don't die on me. Don't die on me. Come on, internet. There we go. As coronavirus spreads, poll shows nearly 60% in U.S. believe political system designed solely to serve the rich. The good thing about this is more people are starting to realize that. New polling out Wednesday backdrop by the continuing coronavirus outbreak shows that most of the country believes the U.S. political system works only for the wealthy and elite rather than for working people. In a survey of 1,002 Americans taken by The Hill and Harris X, 57% of respondents said they believe the political system serves the interests of the wealthy and powerful versus 32% who said it works for all Americans. I'm trying to figure out who is the 31. We know the 1% feels fine. Who the hell are the 30%? Who are these people that don't get that the way that our system works screws us all? How do you not get it? Anyway, those articles are all indexed in the blog post for today. But the other one that I wanted to tell you is about this one called it's about the seniors. Every American citizen, every American resident qualifies for that $1,200 check if you're an adult. Okay, everybody. But the government is trying to get some to go through hoops, and the worst case to get their check. If you're old, if you're a veteran that normally doesn't file your taxes, now they want you to figure out how to file your taxes to get it, even though they already have all your information, your social security information, and they're sending you a social security check. They have your disability, if you're veteran information, they're sending you a disability check. Why do they need you to go through the other step of going outside or racking your brain to get something that Congress passed for the population at large? And the thing about it is, this affects older people. And as usual, you know what's the reason behind this? The reason behind this is so that less people take this than would otherwise do. You know what I mean? Old people get the money, they may not spend it as much, but the young people get it, they're going to spend it right away. There are a lot of reasons why they probably did this. So if you have a grandmother who is on Social Security but don't file taxes, help her out, help him out. Likewise, a veteran who needs our help, help them out, please. Because these politicians, again, they care very, very little about you. They care very, very little about you. The headless king of France might disagree with you. Oh, really? I guess you want to talk about the guillotine, huh? Ledo, you're a case, my brother. You're a case. Okay, John Thai says, not everyone gets $1,200. People above 75. You're right. I should have said that. People above $75,000 don't get it as an individual, and people. That's not. I'm sorry. Let me correct that. As you pass 75,000 income, you lose $5 per $100 above $75,000. And likewise for a family of two, that $2,400 drop after $150,000. But for most Americans, that's not the kind of income that they make. Most Americans, I forgot what the median income is in the United States now, but again, most Americans are going to qualify for this. Lee Grant says, Egberto, TDS is causing him to be tremendously judgmental today. What is TDS again, Lee Grant? What is TDS? My mind may be going, so, I don't know what TDS is. You got to tell me what TDS is. Anyhow, folks, Trump derailment syndrome. Trump, I think you're talking about Trump derailment, the derangement syndrome. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I don't think so. You think I do have that, Lee Grant? I don't think so. I don't think so. I just think Trump is so bad. Trump is such an incompetent, unintellectual, mean, insensitive, unable to be empathetic, unable to feel president. I don't think anybody who doesn't like him would have Trump derangement syndrome. What I think, I'll be honest with you. I love you all. You too, Lee Grant. I love you all. You're my conservative brothers, and I need you. I need Ledo. I need CSAC. I need all you my conservatives on the board. But let me tell you something. It is important for you to understand how I feel about you. I sit down and wonder. You've seen Obama, and if you want to be objective about Obama, you can think about Obama. You've seen Clinton. You've seen Bush number 1, and even Bush number 2. But let's leave Bush number 2 because it's a special case. There is some similarity between Reagan and Trump. The only difference I think you'll see is Reagan is Mr. Smooth. I'm dumb, but I'm very smooth. People tell me what to do, but I'm very smooth. I'm used to being given lines, but I'm very smooth. See, Trump doesn't have that. Trump was given the silver spoon, and he lost his daddy's money over and over again. And, the corporatocracy doesn't mind giving him money because somehow, they are able to maybe get him to launder what they need him to launder for. So, no, it's not the Trump derailment syndrome. Anyhow, going back, we have some other good news here. The good news is that most Americans now want Medicare for all. The corporatocracy ran some nasty ads that started to bring it down. And with the coronavirus, just like I said would happen, The coronavirus is going to teach people a whole lot of things. It's going to show us that it is time for us to restructure what our economy looks like. And we are going to have to engage to do that. We cannot leave it up to others to do it. We just have to do it ourselves. So one of the things that I want to do is I want you to listen to this other this person that's coming on, Mac Regan, because Mac Regan's going to really score us up. Let me run through the mail because this is an interview. After the interview, we don't have much time. So let's see. Some preachers ain't jack. Troy, you're so right. Troy, you're so right. Lee Grant, wow, self-righteous finger pointing. That is finger pointing in a self-righteous way. But no, I'm not self-righteous. Not at all. I don't believe in that. Lawrence Sims, Cash App will take care of their money. Yeah, but you see, when you're in church, right, there's a certain thing about having that pastor looking down at you saying, and the Lord wants you to give me money for my Cadillac, my big house, and my vacations, and to do the facelift on my wife. Than staying home and saying that, when you do that, when you're at home with your Cash App and you know you're home and you're not working, you're going to say, I don't think I'm giving the pastor that today. He needs you in church so that he can continue to brainwash you. Okay, Troy, our tithes, our offerings are going back to dope. Okay, sir. Let's see, Lee Grant, name of one of those evil pastors. I don't have to name them. I don't really want them to come back and say, Berto, I'm going to sue you for calling me evil. Even though they couldn't win, but I don't want to be bothered. But I put it this way, a large percentage of the preachers here in Texas and elsewhere are evil, period. Okay, Lawrence Sims says, let's remember the election do matter. And I think that article, I'll look at it later, sir. Troy Astra says, coronavirus threatens the rich, poverty can't. I love, Troy, that's an interesting statement, right? Because they could have all the money in the world. If they have an immune system that can't handle the coronavirus, you're right about that. I answered, I clarified what Brother Tice has just said to clarify. And let's see, Daniel Ledoux, the headless king of France, might disagree with you. Yeah, somebody may want my head. I don't know. Troy Astra, we're not mad at Trump. We're fed up. I love that. We're not mad. We're fed up and we're disappointed that many Americans cannot see what we all see, and it's proven. Okay, Troy Astra says, Reagan was a great liar. Trump is a... You know what's the difference, though? Trump is a terrible liar, but he doesn't give a damn. I mean, this guy would say the opposite things in the same sentence. I think the problem, I think he is mentally ill. There's a part of your mind that gives you parameters to work under. I don't think he has that. Daniel Ledoux, I learned Egberto is well prepared to take advantage of a crisis for his political ends. Really? I am honored, Daniel Ledoux, that you think I'm well prepared. I am honored that you're saying that. So thank you so kindly. Because you know what my mother always told me when I was growing up? Be good at whatever you decide to be. So when I was an engineer, I made sure to be good when I worked for NASA, Ford, and all these other companies. I was damn good at these companies. And likewise, when I formed my own company, I made sure to be good at it. I always listened to my mother. Always listen to my mother. Okay, Daniel Lee Grant says he should try to leverage Corona into a revolution that will bring his socialist, communist utopia. No. I want a free enterprise utopia with a very strong safety net. And guess what, Lee? Guess what, Daniel? You guys would love it. And you guys want it. Your ideology doesn't allow you to say that. Daniel says, I believe he is. Well, thank you, sir. We're going to go ahead and play that interview now. Look, guys, I love you all. I really do. And you keep coming by. You keep talking to me. There are certain things that you guys help me with. And that is, by you telling me these things, you kind of tell me what the arguments are out there, some that I may not have known. So I really depend on you. I really need on you. So know that you're always welcome here. Let's go ahead and play the interview that I did this morning with Mac Regan. Here we go. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Rant. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us. Look, folks, will COVID-19 unite or divide our society? America's social capital, that is, how individuals and groups work together or don't to create or inhibit corporation. The answer to those questions will have much to say about how we survive today and build a better tomorrow. How will we live together? How will we seek truth and sort through bias, communicate and find common ground, balance individual and societal priorities, and take responsibility for ourselves and be our brothers and sisters' keepers? Here to discuss these important issues is Mac Regan, author of the new book, The 2020 American Revolution, 2020 Decision Support for Voters. Mac Regan, welcome to Politics Done Right. It is my pleasure to have you here with us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be on this morning. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, before we get deep into the issues, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I had a 35-year career in management consulting. I ran a variety of businesses within that consulting, both in the healthcare area. Then I ran in the human capital practice, the job evaluation compensation practices, and I ran a global human capital business prior to my retirement several years ago. Since then, I've been spending all my time researching and writing about citizenship. And so my first book, Global Citizen Patriots, came out in 2016 in preparation for the election then. And earlier this year, my new book, 2020 American Revolution, came out really as a voter support guide for the 2020 election. This is going to be a really contentious and difficult election. And voters need support, and they need to know how to ask the right questions.
Well, I mean, that is so true. One of the things that got to me most importantly was the piece that you wrote. And the questions are, we are now in the doldrums. The economy, for all practical purposes, have crashed. The question is, how do we rebuild from there? And I think a lot of people think about waiting for, okay, we have recovered. Now we can think about doing what we need to do. I think what you wrote is more important. We need to start thinking during this crash so that we start rebuilding the processes, both societal and otherwise, to move forward. And you say to that.
That's exactly right, Egberto. And I would supplement that by saying that this is complex. We have a lot of issues to deal with. We have gross inequality. We have poverty, child poverty. We have a healthcare system that's ranked 43rd in the world. We have all kinds of social media and media right now. Our media right now is weaponized by the right and the left, both sides, frankly, in a way that doesn't serve the majority of citizens in the country who are moderate, frankly, are more moderate than the tails. You know, the parties are not helpful. They exist to win elections, not serve us. And think about all the issues relative to climate, all the issues relative to our faulty infrastructure, all of the issues relative to wealth and income inequality. These are really complex, deep issues. So my theory of the book is to really have voters think about these issues not as solution 1 and solution 2 and solution 3, but let's ask the candidates the right questions that force the candidates to give us a response on those issues that are important. And I've divided the book into sort of an economic capital evaluation. So we have political capital, and we have social capital, we have financial capital, we have built capital, which is infrastructure. We have the most important thing, human capital. You know, people are number one, right? But we don't often treat them that way in terms of how we deal with things like the coronavirus and how we deal with pay levels continuing and jobs continuing. And we don't have a good social network for healthcare. So we have a lot of issues, and the ability of voters to sort through that is going to say lots about the way our future goes, the way our democracy goes. And Social capital is one of those things that really is difficult for people. Everybody has their own biases. I have my biases. You have your biases. I would call those beliefs some days, but other people would call them something else.
Let me tell you, the reason I want to stop you right there is because I want to take this in the direction of a paper you wrote, which we'll be publishing at our site as well. And I think it's important because before we get to these solutions, we have to learn how to communicate with folks. We need to learn how to communicate in a manner where people have respect for each other, irrespective of their beliefs, irrespective of all these things. And here's what you wrote a paper titled, Improving Social Capital in the Age of Disease, Disinformation, and Distrust. And I think that hits the nail on the head. You separated that paper into 5 different things that we had to do. And, I am a former, I am still a board member of the Coffee Party, where we discuss a whole lot of civility and how do we have civil conversations. And in looking at these 5 items, I sat down and I said, we could have pasted that in just about every tenet that we have within our structure. So let's go ahead and discuss that. Avoid characterizations such as liberal, conservative, etc. Why don't you expand on that?
Exactly. Well, thank you for kind comments about the article. I mean, just to define social capital for your listeners, social capital I define as an asset when it helps us build consensus, trust, and reciprocity. But on the converse of that, it becomes a liability when it creates distrust, a lack of cooperation and division. So what I've suggested in the article is there are ways to think about this as an individual. We can't solve all the dysfunction in the media, at least overnight. But each individual and as a community of voters, we can think about really 5 different things here that might help us get to thinking about social capital in a more collaborative, in a more trustful manner. So the first thing I come up with is really, let's avoid characterizations such as liberal, conservative, nationalist, Democrat, Republican, whether you're a Christian, whether you're agnostic, whatever it is. Let's recognize that really no one single group has all the right answers. We need to work with all those groups. So you need to look beyond that. People need to think beyond that. And the second thing that
before you go to the second, because I love that. I love that. When I saw that in the paper that you wrote, I was a bit disappointed for one part. I wanted you to expand a little bit more on that section. How in our polarized society, a society with that is bipartisan as opposed to, let's say, many different parties, how do we do that? How do we start to try to talk to folk and say, well, let's drop that I'm a Republican, let's drop that I'm a Democrat, let's just talk these issues? How do you first make that approach to convince somebody to vote against their own culture many times?
Well, I think the answer relies on the fact that look what we've gotten for government with the polarized method, the social distrust, where the Republicans are fighting the Democrats every day. What one says is automatically anathema to what the other thinks. And that is a formula for sure failure politically. So if you, for example, on the far right, just basically are going to believe everything the far right says, or if you're on the far left and you believe everything the far left has. I mean, look when the Obama administration had control of both houses of Congress and the presidency, they put through the Affordable Care Act. Now, I might like the Affordable Care Act because I think we need to deal with our health insurance here, but the Republicans hated it. The fact that they were unable to work together to a better health care solution caused the Republicans, as soon as they got control of Congress and the presidency, to try to repeal it. At the same time, the Republicans, when they got complete power during the, when they had both houses of Congress, and when they had, they put in the tax reform that really, all it did was serve to increase inequality. So I would tell you that compromise and trust and the ability to talk amongst each other is where most Americans are. If you look at the breakdown of American voters, really there's only about 10% on each tail that is far right and far left. Now, there are people that are more conservative than not. There are people that are more liberal than not. But the majority of Americans, 2/3, according to the statistics I cite in the book, are moderate. So if you can come up with a candidate who can serve both masters and do it in a moderate way, I think there's an audience out there that will be more trustful and ready to vote for those moderate candidates.
Okay, let's go to the second item because I think you kind of stepped on a number 4, but let's go ahead and do the second one.
Yeah, the second thing is that all of us, but particularly the media and we as individuals, need to commit to truth. Where there's no truth, there is no trust.
Right.
And right now we have a truth problem. So we need to verify as individuals, don't blindly trust the sources that are well-regarded fact checkers and expose yourself to a range of media sources. So right now, you have folks who only listen to right-wing news. We have people that only listen to the more liberal news. Well, you know what? We need to balance that. People need to get both sources. In the book, I suggest sources that I think are balanced and present both sides of the story. NPR is a good example of that. But not everything has. So if you read the New York Times, it has a liberal sort of sway, right? If you read the Wall Street Journal, it has a more conservative sway. But both sources are good sources in terms of they try to tell the truth. They have professional journalists writing the articles, and there's a sort of standard that they exist. So you may not agree with the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times on a daily basis, but if you read both, you get a little balance in your life.
Let me ask you something as far as truth is concerned. There are certain truths that are absolute, and there are certain things, I won't call them truths, things that are that have some sort of gray in it. How do you determine, how do you fight an issue when we're dealing with absolute truths versus this is my opinion about something?
Yeah, two thoughts on that. One, in the book, I would say that American truths are often related to our constitutional values. So all men are created equal, right? We do a lousy job of executing that historically, but the reality is that is a value that we all hold, and it is a central truth that we all theoretically believe. So the things in the Constitution, like that, the things in the Gettysburg Address, all of those documents that reflect our historical values are a great starting place to get to truth. The other part of truth is, facts and checking facts. And, it goes beyond our constitutional values. So facts relative to climate change, facts relative to the fact that we have a very poor healthcare system that nobody believes that we actually have. We're 43rd in the world in healthcare in terms of not having coverage. But people widely regard our healthcare system as one of the best in the world. It is not. One of the worst. In that it doesn't cover people, and it has quality shortcomings as well as quantity shortcomings. So getting to those facts requires asking yourself some tough questions, going to those different sources that I referred to, trying to balance that information. This is really hard stuff for most people. It requires an introspection and a look into yourself and a willingness to take other opinions that is really hard to do.
Now, let me tell you something. From the time that I read your bio, etc., it was evident to me that you are somebody on the moderate side of the aisle, if you will, somebody that is very moderate. You kind of see things down the middle. I find it. I think it is important for us to understand, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. Just like there are, let's say, liberals and there are conservatives, that moderates are also a point of view.
No, I think moderates are a point of view. I would characterize myself as a social liberal and a financial conservative, for instance.
I figured that.
Yeah,
your management.
I think that would be a fair characterization. And where I stand on climate change, I'm a believer in climate change. I'm a believer that we need to do something. So everybody has their own opinions on these, but but how you attack each one of those issues, whether it be climate change or financial inequality or child poverty or our poor infrastructure, those require solutions. People and candidates are required to come up with solutions. They are required to have realistic solutions. So coming up with a solution that the other party won't buy or the majority of Americans won't buy, or coming up with solutions that are nothing but lies to make political capital are not the way we need to go. So we need to call out lying, and we don't do a good job of that. I mean, some of the media calls out. I mean, the president has a list of 15,000, pieces of misinformation.
Yes.
Now, maybe his heart's in the right place on some of this stuff, and maybe it isn't. But the reality is, it's the media's duty to call that out, and it's his supporters need to acknowledge that's a problem and try to persuade his constituents, his members of Congress, that that's a way to lose the election.
Interestingly, number 3, recognize the information bias starts from within, because I think that plays a part into what you just said. His constituents need to be able to realize certain things. Where does recognizing that information bias exists sort of play into that?
Yeah, well, information bias for all of us starts within. We all come from, different cultures. We're of different races and ethnicities. We have different religious beliefs. We have different levels of education. We have different levels of experience in terms of who we've been dealing with and who we work with. We have, we come from a whole lot of different things. That's part of the beauty of America and part of the promise of America. But right now that's dividing us, and we're not harnessing it to full advantage. So we have to understand those confirmation biases. We have to understand where people are coming from and not just automatically assume that we are right and they are wrong, because you're never right all the time. They are never right all the time. I work with a number of people in business from around the world historically. I also work with a number of people in our town here, from, the fire department to the mayor. And, people really have they're not trustful of each other. But when they sit down and actually talk amongst each other, you'd be amazed what happens. People start trading facts. They start trading information. And all of a sudden, the person who's next to you doesn't look green or white or black anymore. The person looks like you. And, we all have similar problems. We all don't want child poverty. We all want better health care. We all want better wages. We all want to develop our human capital. So I think there is common ground, but you got to sit down and talk about it.
Mac, that is your magic statement right there. Because I've found that in my own activities with people. I'm a pretty liberal guy who live in a very conservative area, and the folks that I hang with around here when we're talking and having coffee are mostly conservatives. And that last statement that you made is so true. By the time you're done with the conversation, and I think that is the respect that some folks like us, I think, get, is by the time why you can speak to many people from different modalities, if you will, is once people see the honesty, the truth within your convictions or whatever, suddenly you can have a conversation. And not only a conversation, but you can also change minds.
Well, you mentioned the word respect, and that's what it's all about.
Yes.
When you sit down and talk to people about your views, you may still not disagree and you may agree to disagree, but you respect the person's opinion and you've heard the person's opinion. That person knows he or she is being heard. There are projects right now ongoing in the United States that get voters together from a variety, a cross section of voters, economic groups, different religious groups, different ethnicities, sit them down in a room for a couple of days with a facilitator, and they go through, here are some questions and issues. And the amazing thing, and what comes out at the end of those sessions, is often people gain an understanding of what others are thinking. And that understanding is the platform that allows them to reach compromise. And that's what we need in this country.
Now, in that the fourth item, you talk about how support candidates who offer specific plans and changes. I want to tie that into something that that we've been talking about, and that is when you talk about the differences among people, but whenever they sit down and find out the things that they have in common, it is so much more. The interesting thing that I find is that what our leaders do is they monopolize on differences. They accentuate the differences in order to keep dissension and get what a certain or select few want in this country as opposed to what most of us want. Would you agree with that? And does that kind of fit into what we're talking about?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Our representatives in Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, are so influenced by two things: money, the campaign contributions, primarily lobbyist contributions, number one. And number two, they're very influenced by what they would call their constituency. So their constituency is more and more a hardcore group of voters on the right and the left who are always going to show up at the polls because they're really ideologically committed to their point of view. That leaves the middle out. So when the politicians concentrate on their funders, who are often the wealthy and also large businesses who are looking for favors, they're not serving the public. When the representatives concentrate on just a fragment of the electorate, because that electorate might represent 20%, but that 20% is going to show up at the polls every time. They over-focus on that group and ignore the people and don't incent the other people to get to the votes. So I think there are ways to get people to I'm working on an op-ed now that basically says, we ought to pay people to vote. We got a $2.2 billion, $1 trillion bailout, right?
Right.
How about bailing out our democracy by sending everybody who votes a $100 check?
I want to see, when you write that op-ed, you send it to me so I could post that as well, because I really want to see how you're going to put that together. I am all ears. I am all ready to listen. But I want to touch on something here, because you talk about the middle. I don't know if you see some of the stuff that I've written, but I don't particularly like the word middle, because I think you've already said something that we both agree on 100%, and that is, if you put us all together, what you find out is most of the stuff that we are all aspiring for are pretty darn the same. And I hate calling that the middle, because the middle kind of have a tendency to believe like there are left-wing policies that are no good or right-wing policies. And let me give an example. I am sure that Matt Regan wants to be able to go to any doctor that he wants to see and be able to not come out bankrupt out of that office. That is a reality for us all. The question is, well, how do we get there? We have to figure out ideology versus practicality and reality. And I bet if you and I were to sit down, we could come out and say, well, these are what the numbers say, and this is a preferred way to do it based on those numbers. Forget it. Yeah,
I think you're right. The word middle is probably not the right word. I would say the word is moderate.
I'm going to have to learn.
In all things, moderation, they say, right?
Yes, that's true. That is a true statement. I may have to learn to like the word moderate because, I think they've so conflated moderate and middle. I may have to learn to do that. But after talking to you and loving what you've had to write thus far, I think I may consider the word moderate. I probably will. Anyway, let's go. Let's talk about increased shared faith across diverse communities, because in as much as you put that number 5, right? Yep. I kind of likely would have liked it to be number 1, just because of what the politicians do to separate people on all these different isms.
Yeah, I think whether it's number 1 or number 5, I don't know. I think people will make their own decision on that. But excuse me.
Bless you.
The way to get people to work together more is to create what I would call shared faith.
Right.
In other words, we have to share in the solutions. We have to share in the questions. And whether it's education access, which right now is very uneven. Mm-hmm. So in my old town, we had a very good school, funded at about $20,000 per student from the local tax base. 2 miles away, we had not a very good school that was funded by a tax base in the next town that was getting students $12,000 per student. Now, is that a fair deal? Both are public schools, but there's a huge difference between a student getting $20,000 a year and a student getting $12,000 a year. So the ability to talk through that, I think most Americans would agree, hey, that's not fair. So how do we orchestrate that? Do we change the tax base? Do we make it more of a broad tax base? Do we share across borders? So this type of conversation on education access, on housing access, on socially diverse networking are ways to promote actions that create broader understanding and thereby create better social cohesion. So, for example, we have a number of institutions now that do a really good job at social cohesion. Let's take the military, for instance. You go into the military after high school, that's a very diverse, you get everything in the military. And as a result, you're forced to, in a team environment, sometimes involving life and death, to put your trust and your reciprocity in the hands of other people. That is a great example of, the military is by its very nature incredibly diverse, and that, it would be nice if we could use employment practices at businesses. My old business was a global business. Half of our employees were outside of the United States. So until I was able to work with people from outside the world, outside of the United States, I didn't have that perspective that you get by dealing with a Japanese national or a German national or a Russian national. They have different perspectives on life. The ability to understand those perspectives and work with those people is a skill, but it also involves incredible understanding. And the key to that is the ability to see their problems more clearly. You got to listen to them. The ability to debate. So you might have a firm opinion that is more or less based on facts. They may have the facts more right or more wrong than you think. But the point is, debate helps resolve those questions. It helps us see our problems more clearly. And I mentioned some of the efforts that have been funded by universities and others to bring diverse groups together. I think, we ought to make that part of our democracy. We ought to regularly do that in the states, in the localities, bring people together, have them discuss these issues. It might cost us a few dollars, but what's the price of democracy, right?
Absolutely. Now, I want to get a little bit off subject because you brought it up, and I want to expand on it a little bit because I've spoken about this a whole lot. You just said something about the school, let's say school districts. Adjacent school district, because they have different tax bases, one group may get $12,000 per student, another get $20,000 per student. My answer to that is simple, really, and that is the tax base should be for the entire darn country, if you will, and every student get the same access to education. That would be my solution. However, what that means is that $20,000, that place that was getting $20,000 likely does not get $20,000 anymore. One of the biggest problems in America is for those who have had the privilege of having the most. When we start to speak about everybody having equal access to success where there is a limited sized pie, it means those who were used to getting more may have to do with a little bit less. How do you handle that issue?
Well, I think you handle it over time. These issues are not, you can't turn on a switch and change where we are right now. But I think you can have a plan that over time changes the tax base from a real estate appraisal tax base to a public funding tax base. So the folks in that town that are paying $20,000 per student may continue to pay $20,000 a student, but at least some of that money needs to go into the public funding. That school also gets state and federal money because it's a public school in addition to the tax base. So maybe they could be relieved of some of the state and federal tax base, saying you already have enough per student. That money that goes into the public trough could then be used to beef up the other schools. The other idea that I think, would fester some more social integration is, let's integrate the schools a little bit more. Let's take students from one school and move them to another school. This school that gets $20,000 had very little diversity. That was part of the reason I moved my daughters to a different school at some point, because, having experienced the benefits of diversity, it seemed to me that just wasn't, once you got out of elementary school, it wasn't going to serve them well in the long run. But that type of diversity is not readily available. So moving students across different schools is another way to build social capital, build cooperation, build trust, and build understanding. So I think you can only do that over a period of time. This is, as I said, not a switch you can turn off. It's sort of like our healthcare system. You can't Bernie Sanders it overnight. You're going to have to deal with 1 million, people who work in the health insurance industry who might be out of a job if Medicare for All comes through. Well, you need a way to find them new jobs. You need to train them for new skills. And I think if you could convince them that you could get them better jobs and more meaningful jobs than they have right now, they might be more receptive to.
I am glad I'm glad you brought that up, because, by the way, that is in the bill for retraining of the people who would lose their job as far as Medicare for All is concerned. But let me tell you what I'm most impressed with this interview. Somebody who sees that you are from management, etc., would have the opinion that a lot of the ideas that you have, and even some that I scanned in your book, wouldn't be the ideas that you would come out with. And even when we discuss the school issue we've just discussed here, some of these innovative ideas as well, I think these are important issues. Now, I'm a bit more, simple, if you will, with solutions, and that is, my thing is everybody just gets the same amount for the schools. But I mean, you talk about transition, and I understand that. I think we're coming to the close of this interview, but I think one of the most important reasons for reading your book, and I haven't read it completely other than scanning, is many Americans that need to hear this. You are able to. I'm talking about Mac Regan here, is able to express it in a manner that a lot of folks who otherwise wouldn't understand these issues are going to understand them. When I saw the piece that you wrote, that is what I got out of who you were as an author. So please give me some final words and tell us how to go about getting your book. And if you want to give a quick synopsis of your book, let's go ahead and do that.
Well, thank you very much for those kind comments. I appreciate it. The book is really designed. It's only 80 pages long. It's highlighted. So if you're a millennial like my two daughters and you don't read, or you don't want to read, you can just read the highlights and probably get through it in 2 or 3 hours. But the way the book sets up is by stating some facts. So we are 43rd in the world in healthcare. We have 15% child poverty, even though we're the richest country in the world. Our public education system is very uneven, and that shows up in test scores versus others. These are facts, all right? Our infrastructure gets a D+ in our annual engineering report. That's a fact. Our climate is changing. Our water systems, if you live in Flint and you're drinking out of plastic bottles and you have no opportunity probably in the future to drink out of anything but plastic bottles, and that poor water has harmed 10,000 children irretrievably. And as we have created a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico through dumping chemicals into the Mississippi River, these are all facts, and the book outlines all these facts. So I've set the book up in a way where we have problems. I don't know all the solutions, but I think voters need to be aware of the problems. They need to be aware of the facts. They can dispute the facts all they want. I put the sources in there, and, good for them to dig into it and figure out what they agree with and what they don't agree with. But the facts are there as I see them. I think they're compelling. And let's not try to boil the ocean here and come up with every voter needs to have every solution. But every voter needs to know what those problems are, and they need to prioritize them in their own mind and ask the candidates the questions that will get to the points that they think are most important. So it's about questions and it's about problems. And I hope, most voters will be able to get through 80 pages and show up a little bit more informed and mostly just show up.
Excellent. I'll index to your book. Mac Regan, author of The 2020 American Revolution, 2020 Decision Support for Voters. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right, and I hope to hear from you. And I want that other op-ed on paying the voter.
I'm working on it. I'll send it to you first thing.
Absolutely.
Hey, Carol, thank you. It's been a privilege to be on. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to that. But let me tell you something. For those that consider themselves, quote unquote, more progressives, they would look at a guy like Mac Regan and said, wait a minute, this guy sort of, he's moderate and he's you know what? Let me tell you what I admired with Mr. Regan. What I really admired is that he wasn't one of those who didn't look at all the problems and understood that the problems were there. And he was the type also that was willing to look at all the different options, the solutions, even as he calls himself, well, I'm a moderate and most people are in the middle. We kind of disagreed on using the word middle, etc. But I think guys like Mac Regan are important in this movement to reach a sect that really thinks in a manner that wants to move this country forward in a sort of a progressive way. And we're talking about not using labels, but you know what I mean by progressives. And at the same time, we're able to reach those that are scared for those younger folk or those others that they think just don't get it. Because he's been around. He's been in management. He's been all over. He's been around. He understands the thing. So there is room in this movement for a lot of folk, and he can actually bring a lot of folk along as well. Folks, as you know, before we go, I got to ask you to please go ahead and remember, visit our store. And as you can see on the screen, we have all these items that you can get, our cups, our books, and remember, I always show you our book. Yeah, don't forget, get As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Yes, understand how the economy really works in an easy to understand way. Please go ahead. Visit our store.politicsdoneright.com and support the show. But more than anything else, I would love for those of you that are listening to become members. And how do you become a member? Go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. It is right there on the screen. Alternatively, if you want to contribute to the show, in other words, keep us going, keep us alive and well, please go ahead and consider contributing, keeping us alive at paypal.me/politicsdoneright. That is paypal.me/politicsdoneright. If you're on YouTube, feel free to give me a what's called a chat up, or I think they call it a super chat. Give me a super chat. Click on that $sign, and whatever you want, whatever you think is worth it to keep us giving you independent media, keep this stuff going alive, go ahead and contribute on YouTube as well, because that is how we're going to make a difference. Look, let me be frank. I am not making a hell of a lot of money trying to do this. I gave up a whole lot to do this because this is what's right. All right? So those folks who support Politics Done Right, and there are a lot of you that support Politics Done Right, we need about 10 times the amount of folks that are supporting Politics Done Right for us to really survive in the long term and for us to really make the impact that we need to make. So we're dependent on you. So please go ahead and go to Patreon, patreon.com/politicsdoneright, and become a subscriber. $1.99 or more, whatever you want. $1.99. Would you buy me a coffee somewhere? Would you buy Politics Done Right a coffee somewhere? Go ahead and contribute. Go to the store.politicsdoneright.com. Or if you want to contribute directly to us, paypal.me/politicsdoneright. And let me put the link to the store on inside of the chat room as well. That's the link to the store that I just placed there. And if you want to help us with our equipment fund, when we go to the conventions, when we go to these different places, you can use our GoFundMe page, and our GoFundMe is gofundme.com/independent-media-upgrade. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!